Everyone, it's Sami from Sami's Sweet Life, and I am finally sitting down to do Stella's birth story. She will be 3 months tomorrow, and I just filmed a diaper video, so I thought since she is still napping that I would try to squeeze this birth story video in. I've just been kind of putting it off because it was a little bit traumatic, and I think overall births maybe just are always a little bit traumatic, even like ones that go smoothly. Now I ended up giving birth to her at 30, I think it was 37 weeks and like 3 days. So she was a little bit early. I had cholestasis, which is a liver disorder, and I was really itchy. I started itching like all over my body, could not sleep, and then started itching on my palms and my feet, which is the really telltale sign of cholestasis. And so they ended up taking her out early via a planned C-section. I had had an emergency C-section with Olivia. To like backtrack, her head was in the 99th percentile, basically like the biggest baby head that is possible, and she was trying to come out on the crown of her head, like the largest part of her head. Her head was tilted and she just got stuck. Like there was no way she was coming out. I ended up laboring, pushing for over 3 hours, and her not coming out, they did the C-section. Going into Stella's pregnancy, I knew that a VBAC would be an option because of the situation before. I was still pushing right, I was still doing everything right. I labored all the way, and it just came down to her head was too stinking big. And so I thought in the beginning of this pregnancy I would have the option to VBAC, and then like every complication happened, and it ended up just not being recommended with cholestasis. Induction for a VBAC is very limited. My hospital basically would let me do Pitocin, and that was it. And I didn't want to be in a situation where I, go through all the labor, struggle, and then end up with a C-section anyway. And it's just was the safest, easiest way to just do the planned C-section with having complications. I had had placenta previa early on in the pregnancy, so I figured I would have a C-section anyway, so I'd already come to terms with that. Thankfully, my placenta had moved far enough away that I could have had a VBAC had I not had another complication. That was the main point for me, is just to get her out safely, quickly, and be done with it. And so I kind of mourned the loss of that VBAC because I really, in the beginning, I really wanted that VBAC. It didn't matter. Like I just wanted her out, I wanted her safe, and at the end of the day, it didn't even matter. Like the whole situation didn't matter as much as I was like dreaming of that VBAC. The second, my baby's life could be in danger, I didn't care. I wanted her out. So moving into it, a scheduled C-section is way different than an emergency one. The first time I labored the whole way through. I pushed for hours and hours, and I still ended up with a C-section. And this time I had a scheduled date. I had a scheduled time to come into the hospital. I went in, I walked into the hospital. I got things done, like they checked my blood, they gave me a bag of fluids, and I walked into the operating room, like on my own feet. I walked into the operating room. They do a spinal block for C-sections, and so I'm sitting on the table getting my spinal block, not in any kind of pain, where I got an epidural the first time, and I had already labored for a really long time, and I was already in pain, so I didn't feel the epidural at all. Well, I felt the spinal block, and walking myself into such a surreal experience, and it was really intimidating. Like I think I almost had a panic attack during this whole experience. So I walked in, and it's just so bright white and sterile, and there's tons of people like moving around doing things. They're counting tools, so I hear people counting, they're clanking things together, and I'm hearing like every single noise going on in the room. And then pretty quickly they give me the spinal, and I feel it, like feels like a really strong bee sting. And I ended up, when they had me bending over, there's somebody like holding me a little bit, and I felt the pain of something going in. They numb the skin, but they can't numb everything, and I wasn't already like distracted from anything, so I'm feeling everything that she's doing, and I have to be hunched over as much as possible. Well, I start raising up just from the pain. Like I just winced, and somebody held me back down. They're like, no, don't move. And so I almost messed it up just by like my natural instinct of moving because it was painful. And so that was really different. And it was also really different, like feeling the numbness take over from my under my boobs down was completely numb, and it feels like pins and needles. Like when your foot's going to sleep, you feel that like pins and needle tingling. Well, I felt that from basically under my boobs all the way down my whole body. I could still feel like sensation, but I didn't feel any pain, and they're like cutting me completely open and pulling a baby out. So they're definitely causing some pain, and I didn't feel any of that. I just felt very tingly, like very pins and needlesy, and it was really uncomfortable. It's a really funky experience and feeling, but the part that gave me the most anxiety and the panic was hearing everything. Like I hear heard every sound that they made, every tool that they clanked together, every person's voice, and I'm hearing all these noises, and they have a sheet above me, and I'm just with the anesthesiologist, who was amazing, by the way. And so the sheet's blocking my view. I can't see anything, but I'm hearing everything. Like, I'm hearing when they're suctioning blood, and I hear these gurgly sounds, and I feel them tugging on me. I just feel this like really intense pressure. Like, it felt like they were pushing on my chest at some points, and I was just about to lose it. I was really getting panicky. I did end up feeling nauseous, so she did give me some medicine for that, and she did say, like, if you start feeling anxious or you start worrying, I can give you something for that. She said early on that's like a common thing. People get some anxiety during it, and I definitely did, but I didn't want to take anything because she said it can make you sleepy. I was really sleepy during my first C-section because I'd already pushed, I think my labor was like 17 or 18 hours. So I was already really tired, and they gave me some drugs, and I was really tired. I could barely remember any of the C-section, whereas this one, I remember everything. Like, I was fully awake, and it's a totally different experience, and both experiences are not ideal. Like, I don't know, I had something in my head where I was thinking, like, a scheduled C-section, you walk in, an hour later you have a baby, and it's so peaceful and serene and all this, and it was terrifying, like really terrifying, hearing them counting the tools over and over again, and things clanking, and hearing the gurgling sounds. And I didn't know when she was going to be born. Like, I didn't know how many layers they had to cut through. I have no track of time when this is going on, and so I hear them suctioning and gurgling, and I'm thinking, oh, that might be her not breathing. Every gurgle and suction, I was worried that that was her. And thankfully she came out screaming, so I really knew when it was actually her. But every time I was like, oh no, something's wrong. Oh no, something's wrong. And I had these like racing thoughts, and all the noises were really overwhelming, like I said. So in the beginning, like when I walked into the OR, Johnny has to sit in a chair by the door. He can't go in at that point because everything is sterile, and they want to give me the spinal without him. So they get everything sterile. They wrap all the C-section area up. So there's like a curtain here, and there's a curtain all around my body, and that's where the doctors are and the nurses and everybody. And they want to get all that done before he comes in the room. So eventually he did come in, but it felt like forever. Thankfully he came in, and I just like cry. So he was actually there for most of it, and he held my hand and he talked to me, and he tried to distract me a little bit, and he could tell like I was kind of freaking out, but I didn't want the medicine because I didn't want to go to sleep. So the anesthesiologist was monitoring me, talking to me. He was there like being really stable and like trying to joke around with me like he usually does. I'm getting kind of choked up because it's such a hard experience to go through, and I really had no idea. I was not prepared for it to feel so weird. I almost preferred the first way, where I was just out of it. I didn't feel all these things, and this time I was just overwhelmed with all the feelings I had. With her being early, one of the things they said was she could have breathing problems and she could have feeding problems because she was a little bit early. Thankfully, I had gotten steroid shots the weeks leading up to it because we had known about it for a couple of weeks. So they thought her lungs were perfectly developed, and she had passed the ultrasound scans that they do to make sure she's like using her lungs and trying to breathe. Thankfully, she came out screaming and breathing, and they cleaned her up a little bit and let me see her, and they did not let her stay with me for very long because she started doing some grunting breathing, which is like a sign she's not breathing correctly. So they did have to take her down and monitor her for quite a while just to make sure her breathing was okay, because that's one of the main concerns when they're a little bit early. They made sure she was okay and then brought her back, but before they took her away, she sat on my chest for maybe a minute. It was a really short amount of time. She started grunting more and more, and so they took her away. We did not get skin to skin. We did not get immediate breastfeeding, just like with the first C-section. By the time they got me stitched up and back to my room, they brought her in, and we could do the skin to skin and the breastfeeding. So I think from start to finish, from me walking into the OR to me being stitched up and wheeled out, was like an hour and a half at the most. It was a really short process. I lost a lot of blood. I don't think they ended up giving me any blood, so I was just like right on the verge of needing some blood, but it was touch and go for a while. And after you give birth, I don't know if they do this for vaginal births because I've never had one, but for C-section births, they push on your stomach, and that is one of the most painful parts of the whole birthing experience, is them pushing on your stomach. And the first time with Livy, it hurt, like it was really painful, but this time it was excruciatingly painful, and it was because I had so much bleeding. They were pushing extra hard to make sure I wasn't going to hemorrhage. Like you don't want your uterus filling with blood, and you don't want to hemorrhage. You want the blood to come out, and they want to be able to keep track of how much blood you're losing. But at first, like the first few times they were pushing, they could not feel my uterus, and they were thinking I was going to have to go back. They couldn't feel my uterus feeling the way it's supposed to feel. I don't know if it's supposed to feel firm or it's supposed to feel soft, but it was feeling the opposite, and they were worried. So they did a ton of pushing on my stomach. It felt like they came in every 5 or 10 minutes to do the pushing on my stomach, and it was like extended pushing to try to get out as much blood as they could. And they were keeping track of me way more closely than they were when I was postpartum with Olivia. I felt like they pushed on me a little bit and then it was done. This time they pushed on me forever, and it was just a constant, them coming in, pushing on me. And thankfully they did not have to wheel me back in. I didn't have an emergency situation, so it ended up working out fine. My uterus did shrink down how it was supposed to. They just pressed so hard. I ended up having bruises on my stomach for weeks after coming home. I just had bruises like all over my stomach from them pushing so hard. I had such serious blood loss during the operation that they wanted to make sure I was okay. The whole experience was really daunting and I would never want to do it again. So we were pretty dead set on 2 kids and done. Before trying, we were like, okay, if we get pregnant, we have our second kid, we're completely done. And after this experience, I'm 100% done. I do not want to ever experience it again. It was so like nightmare-y, just going through it and hearing everything and being cut open and being aware of everything going on. It's so much worse than like being totally out of it and not really knowing what's going on. The thing I remember most during Olivia's birth is I like couldn't touch my fingers together. I'm like, my fingers are stuck like how they are, and I felt my mouth was dry. And this time it was really, really scary. So I'm definitely 150% sure that we are not having any more kids, because I've done the C-section 2 ways now and I don't want to have to ever do it again. When I was going through it, I wrote this note. I totally forgot, like when I was talking the story, I was really thirsty this time too. And the thing that really pushed me through is I kept thinking about, as soon as I'm done, I get some ice chips. As soon as I'm done, I get some ice chips. I had been fasting for quite a while before then, so I was extra thirsty, and I just really tried to concentrate on those ice chips. And I kept telling Johnny, like, I can't wait to have some ice chips. Here was a note I wrote. I said, it felt like someone was laying on top of me sideways across my stomach, and it definitely felt like that. They were moving me, and I could feel like every shift, that's them tugging and pulling. It just felt like somebody from this side was just laying across me, pressing on me, and I felt really heavy on my chest. So it was just a really bizarre feeling. All in all, I'm just so grateful that everything turned out great. I'm grateful that my body can grow babies. I'm just a little disappointed that I cannot birth them by myself. That's 2 experiences now of having the C-section. I did really want the birthing experience. I wanted to know my body was capable of it, but I'm just glad that both of them were born healthy and they're both great, and my body did this incredible thing growing these babies, and I'm so thankful both times I've been able to breastfeed. And that's been like something where, okay, I didn't have great births, but I could breastfeed, and that's really been the thing I've hung on to. Unfortunately, this pregnancy was really bad, but Livy's pregnancy was really good. My babies came out healthy, and I'm able to feed them with my body, and it's just so magical and so incredible. So no matter how you give birth to your baby, no matter how you feed your baby, it's just incredible what our bodies can do. I'm so thankful that I'm here and able to tell you guys my second birth story, and it's just so weird how the whole experience was. And then a follow-up to the cholestasis, the itching pretty much stopped right when I gave birth. So it was like I was super itchy, like leaving marks on my skin because I was scratching so bad, to not feeling itchy at all. It was such a weird thing to have. So I'm okay. She did have a little bit of jaundice, which is pretty typical anyway, so they just kept an eye on her, and now she's totally fine. All right, I'm hearing her cry, so I've got to wrap this up. I have one more note. The nurses wanted to keep my pain at a 3 or under, like the pain scale, there's a 1 to 10, and I asked for medicine and I was like at an 8, 9. I was like really getting really painful, and they're like, no, you need to tell us before you get to that point, because some of the medicine is as needed and some of it is around the clock to begin with. And so I was like, oh, okay. I thought it was kind of weird that they wanted me to be 100% comfortable after I went through this major surgery. Good in the beginning. You definitely need that in the beginning. But I really thought like, oh, you know, when I really can't tolerate it anymore, that's when I ask for the pain meds. And it wasn't the case. Like, they want you to be comfortable. I think they got me walking by the end of the day that day, the first day, once the meds wore off. They had me up and walking, and it was very controlled, like somebody was helping me do it. And yeah, we're 3 months out now and I'm still having some tingling and discomfort around my incision, but for the most part, I'm pretty much healed. I have tons of baggy skin from having the big tummy, obviously, but it's slowly getting better and better. And yeah, that's where we are 3 months in. So I hope you guys enjoyed this birth story. It was such a weird experience. I hope that you liked this video. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.